one of the struggles I had really early on in my career in product marketing was product and brand marketing were separate, which meant I was consistently fighting these battles to get the brand team to resonate what the product and positioning was. And
Mm.
so what was interesting to me was with this opportunity was how can I make our product and positioning more apparent through our brand by making our product essentially the brand. And one of the other key differentiators of why I wanted to take that approach was coming in, I spent a lot of time investigating our competitors, and I noticed that them, as well as the company I was joining, Vitally, we were all kind of hiding behind just messaging without showing what our product was. And one of the things I've quickly have learned moving into the B2B SaaS space is that people look at software all day, but they quickly make decisions based on what that software can do. And the longer that you withhold them from seeing and understanding what that software is, the more you're putting yourself behind.
Hey everyone, welcome to On Messaging, a show for B2B product marketers on how to create messaging that resonates with the audience. I'm your host, Josh Cronister, and on the show today we have Jeff Chase, the Director of Brand and Product Marketing at Vitally.io. Before joining Vitally, Jeff worked in product marketing and community at places like Plume Design, Verkada, Eero, and Amazon. Jeff's been a two-time founding product marketer at high-growth B2B SaaS startups. In our conversation, he shares his process to creating positioning messaging at high-growth startups, the crucial role of customer conversations to develop messaging, gaining buy-in from leadership for messaging and positioning, how to create effective interactive demos, and so much more. If you enjoy this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and follow it in your favorite podcast app, YouTube, or Substack. It's the best way to get notified of every new episode. All right, let's jump into the conversation. Hey, Jeff, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I was super excited when you said that you were joined. You're putting out a lot of great stuff on LinkedIn, a lot that I've learned from you. I think you had a reaction to the update to Jellyfish's website, and you had some good ideas on what they did messaging-wise and structure-wise on the website. It was awesome. Speaking of, you recently announced a podcast that you're going to put out, Death to Product Marketing.
Yeah.
Love the title. And you think that product marketing title for a job title should be put to rest. But I wanted to ask, where did this idea come from?
Yeah, it's a fun question, and the title definitely is there for a little bit of shock factor.
Yeah.
But it's something that I've really come to realize in a lot of conversations I've had with fellow product marketers, people building our product marketing teams, and then just also people outside of product marketing who I consistently find don't understand what the role of product marketing is, and
Hmm.
they often get very caught up in the title itself, which often kind of makes it hard to understand exactly what product marketing does, mostly in terms of almost limiting the impact that product marketing has on an organization. And what's really interesting to me is like my perspective is coming through from B2B SaaS. And I have a very different perspective on it. I think that maybe some other people would if they're in the B2C space or if they're, in completely other types of markets of B2B and not just SaaS. But I think one of the parts that kind of really triggered it to me was I was recently on the We're Not Marketers podcast with the guys, and we had a really great conversation. And going into that conversation, I always had in my mind that product marketers are marketers, and I think that to me, like I was kind of caught up in this product marketing title, and I have a different background for where I come from product marketing, and I also do brand marketing, which we can jump into, but
Mhm.
I have found in my conversations that it's almost disadvantageous to be like disadvantageous. I suck at words sometimes, but for product marketers to be kind of bucketed in as marketers. And I think a big reason that has become the case is the title itself. The other thing that's really interesting that I've come to realize when it comes to like product marketing as a title is it comes from before the times of B2B SaaS. And I think that a lot of those times, those product marketers were actually a marketer that was more specialized in the marketing activities, especially thinking more about the product and what it does versus the buyer or the market and all those different things. And in the B2B space, product marketing has become more of this like instrumental piece in the GTM engine.
Mhm.
working really closely with product teams, working closely with engineering. And when you typically look at a marketing function, it doesn't do that. And so, what I've kind of come to the conclusion of is like, maybe it's time to put the title of product marketing, or maybe there's time for a new title and there's still product marketers who do things in a certain way, but this role that's become known as product marketing today, especially in the B2B SaaS space, needs to be something else.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the background to it. And I don't have the answer. And that's why, I've had a lot of really great conversations. And I'm sure we'll have some conversations today that trickle into that. But what I really want to kind of do is just get a background of like what people do in product marketing, how they're approaching it. And if we were to go backwards from there of like, what do you do and work that into a title, maybe we'll find some really interesting ideas there of what this role actually is.
Yeah. Very interesting. I love the background. Yeah, you mentioned We're Not Marketers podcast. They've come up a couple times in the show. We actually had Gab on
Oh,
as
nice.
a special guest a couple weeks ago as well, and we got into the topic of our product marketers, and we kind of talked about that a little bit. Um, I've also heard that like product marketing. This was mentioned to me. Product marketing used to be called solutions marketing. I don't know if you've heard that in the past. Um,
I've not heard that in the past, but on LinkedIn and stuff, I see solutions marketing pop up a lot, and
mhm.
it makes sense. And I think it kind of goes back into this like product marketing being this hodgepodge of roles of like you're doing sales enablement, you're doing solutions marketing, which is like vertical and ICP identification.
Yep.
You're doing some branding, you're doing positioning and messaging, you're launching products, you're doing all these different pieces. And what's really interesting is like some do that, some don't. And it makes it really hard to go into a conversation and be like, this is what product marketing does, because it really depends on the person, like what their skill sets are, the
Yep.
company, what their goals are, and
Mhm.
then even more so like how the organization's built out and like how you would plan to be cross-functionally functioning. But yeah, the solutions marketing role is interesting. I've seen it pop up a lot more recently, which was surprising to me because I always saw solutions marketing to the way we kind of were just talking about, which is really being really focused on your markets, your verticals, your ICPs, and like those like kind of pains and solutions to the market being a product
Yep.
marketing function. But what you're kind of, I think, starting to see is product marketing has brought forward a lot of these like really great uh, advantages to businesses, and they want to double down on certain aspects of it because they really see the impact of these roles, which is maybe why you're seeing solution marketing pop back up. But yeah, that's interesting. If you listen to one of the We're Not Marketers podcasts, they actually were talking about how product marketing was originally like brand marketing, and the product marketer was like the brand man. Um, so it's interesting. There's a lot of different backgrounds, which kind of goes back to like why I wanted to start this podcast. Is just like,
Yeah.
what do you do, and like why and how did you end up in product marketing? I think there's a lot of really interesting conversations to uncover in that.
Yeah. I love it. Well, I know we're going to dive a little bit into, brand messaging versus product messaging throughout this
Yep.
episode. And so I wanted first to dig into a little bit of your past experience. You've been a founding product marketer at two high growth B2B startups. And, this show is a lot about the messaging side of the
Yeah.
product marketing role. So I wanted to get your take on, or more so your process on how you created messaging and positioning inside a startup for the first time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my perspective's definitely from like a early stage high growth startup. But with that
Awesome.
said, there's where you start and then there's where you continue to build on top of it. So I think when, if someone out there is looking like how do I start positioning messaging for a high growth startup, maybe in the early stages, the first and most important thing you need to do is talk to the founders and also the founding members of the company. And the reason that's important is you really want to get to the basis of like why they started what they did. And what you're really looking for there is not so much what is the product and how does it work, but why you're building this product and how you're going to go out and differentiate it. What were the pain points that they identified in the market? What were they experiencing? What were they seeing? Did they have these firsthand? And from there, you start to really understand like how are you going to differentiate your message? Because most of the time, you're going to be entering what's already an existing market. You're not going to go into the CRM space, for example, and start to explain what a CRM is. No, you're going to want to tell people why your CRM is being built the way it's being built and what's being built for. So
Mhm.
to me, that's always the most important place to start. And then the second place from there, what I really like to do is start to just like listen to or talk to customers, understand why they bought your product early on. Because what you really when I think about messaging and like how you should really be building out, first you want to start with like differentiation and like I think a lot of times it starts in a pain point, especially if you're being like in a hyper growth early stage startup and you're trying to make your ways into the market. But then the
Yeah.
next thing you need is validation that you actually are legitimate, that they actually should look at you. So building case studies or getting quotes or just simply understanding like how are the ways that people are using your product so you can really bring that message forward, which, maybe jumps ahead of our topics here, but it ties into why I believe, especially in these early stages, your brand marketing and your product market and your product positioning should be one and the same. Because especially in early stage startups and stuff like that, you don't have a ton of flexibility and time to, speak on the airwaves. Like you pretty much have one shot to get your message across. And in most cases, your product is going to be your differentiator, and that should probably be your brand, uh, what you're trying to put out there in the market.
Okay.
Yeah.
Love that. Okay. Um, so just to sum up some of your points as far as like a process, first, you're coming in here, you're the new product marketer, you're thinking like, I need to create some messaging and positioning here. The
Yep.
first person you're going to talk to are those founders because they've already kind of done a lot of that grunt work, it seems like,
Exactly.
of understanding the market. Maybe they were the ones already having those pain points.
Yep.
Um, and you talked about getting to like, well, why did they do it? Why did they create the product? And
Yep.
also, we had Zach Messler on the show too, and he's a messaging consultant, and he does kind of an intensive where he helps other businesses find that as well.
Yeah.
Um, and he talked about getting to the essence too. And I
Mm.
feel like you kind of mentioned that of like, all right, you're understanding why, but you're also trying to understand the essence of why the product exists in the first
Yep.
place.
Yep.
Um,
Exactly.
Awesome. And that builds the differentiation. You're a new startup, say you're entering a competitive space that, like you said, that differentiation is really what's going to help set you apart rather than just being in an echo chamber of all
Yep.
the other CRMs that are out there. And then two, talking to customers. I know like talking to customers can be sometimes intimidating. Also, when you're new to the industry or new to whatever the market is in.
Yep.
How how did you find that going? Did you just kind of step right in and come with a list of questions that you just Googled, or what was your process for getting on a call with a customer and finding what questions you wanted to ask?
Yeah. So, I mean, a little bit of my background is I started in community management, so I'm pretty used to approaching people and talking to them and having like that human element to it. Um, but I don't think all customer interviews have to be the same. You can treat them all a little bit differently. And so, if you are coming in fresh and you don't really know like what you expect to hear or learn from customers, it's really okay to go into some of those earlier conversations and just let them talk. Trust me, people like to talk. Like they are more than happy. You can open up and be like, "What would you change about the product? Why did you pick the product? Like, what are your pain points?" And most people will be happy to kind of just talk. They rather share than like anticipate what questions you're going to ask. But when you start to do that, you can start to kind of like get an idea of like some themes and some topics of the things that you maybe want to go into future conversations with.
Mhm.
And you can start to use that to kind of design the way that you're going to approach those conversations in the future. For example, like when we first started doing our case studies at Vitally, we kind of just went in it open and we just had them share their story about Vitally. And which was really helpful at first, but we started to like not really be able to identify themes or help them direct the conversation in a way that would be impactful for how we want to use those stories in the future. And
Yeah.
so what we started to do more of was have these pre-interviews, asking them the types of targeted questions that would get them in the right direction of sharing the things that would be impactful for us to share externally on their behalf. And so, yeah, I mean, a lot of the times it's just, letting the people talk and share. It doesn't always have to be, designed in a certain way because, to kind of double down on that side of it too is like you don't want to predicate with the way the conversation is going to go. You want to
Hmm.
learn. Like if
Yep.
you go into it with a hypothesis and you push people down that path towards that hypothesis, you're only going to hear what you want to hear. But if you really let those conversations freely flow and let people share their thoughts, it's on you as a product marketer to then take that back and say, this is what person A told me, this is what person B told me. How can I connect these two and like see something, identify something? Like you got to put a little work into it. It's like it's not just going to be handed to you on a silver platter.
Mhm.
But that's kind of part of the role of product marketing. I think to me, like especially when I go to like hiring product marketers or just think about really great product marketers, they are ones who are empathetic and understand customers and understand people, and they're able to connect those dots, and they're able to take those things that they hear to build messaging, build experiences, uh, champion feedback back into the company on things that they should be doing and thinking about. And so, yeah, I mean, it's really it's less about it being structured and
Hmm.
more about it being like what's your intent and how you want to get there, and letting the conversations dictate that versus having kind of like a set guideline of what you want to hear by the end of that conversation.
Yeah, I love this. I feel like what I'm hearing here is having those foundational conversations with the founders and with the customers. Yes, it's going to help you create your messaging and positioning and really give you a good idea of the market. What are the pain points? How are those pain points solved specifically with your product? Obviously, those are very, very core to your messaging, but that's
Yeah.
also so core to just your role as a product marketer. It could bring in competitive intel, how to
Oh, for
enable your
sure.
sales team, what you're going to put on your campaign emails, anything like that. It's going to be so foundational to what you're doing and really set you up for success. It sounds like.
100%. And as I mentioned at the top of like that question, it's also evolving. Like if you are a product marketer and you're treating positioning and messaging and like these types of discovery conversations as a check mark versus like part of your process, then you're going to fail to evolve and grow your business because during the time of you becoming a product marketer and building positioning and messaging and doing all these different types of things that are influenced by this, your founders' perspectives are going to change. Your customers' use cases are going to change. The market's going to change. Your competitors are going to change. And so you constantly need to be thinking about and refreshing that message
Hmm.
because it rarely ever stays stagnant. And I think what the trap that a lot of product marketers fall in is like, I've done the research, I've talked to the people, and we're done. It's like, you're
Yep.
never done. And I think that's what really helps differentiate really strong companies from those that kind of peak
Hmm.
and then fall off. You can almost like think about it as like treating your positioning and messaging as a viral campaign. Like that virality is going to happen one time for you. You can't live off of that forever. You need to continue to iterate and learn and grow. But if you expect to kind of live off that one kind of moment of fame, you're going to fall behind.
Yep.
And so it's really important to crave those insights, crave those progressions in your positioning, messaging, and the market as a whole.
Hmm. Yeah, each category is just going to get more and more competitive,
Oh
more and
yeah.
more competitive. Yep. I don't know if you've ever seen those images where it's just like a wheel of just all the companies that are in specific industries, and
Oh yeah.
it's just overwhelming to you can't even see what's on it because there's just so much stuff. It's almost like a painting that has those individual images in them that make up, a picture
Oh
of,
yeah.
I don't know, Bill Gates, something.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. All right. So we talked a little bit about having those conversations with leadership, but all right, say you had that conversation, you went back, or you also had the conversation with customers, you went back, you created your messaging. How are you going to get buy-in from the founders, from the leaders of the company?
Yeah. I mean, for, most important thing to note here is like it's going to change, like based
Yeah.
on who your founders are, who your leaders are. Like there's a little bit of like an art to it. You have to play a little bit of the politics game, I think, a lot of times when you're having these conversations, because you need to, as a product marketer, you need to balance what you know your founders and leaders and the company want to hear versus the reality of what you have heard and observed in the market. And what I've really found to be effective is hopefully they're not too far apart. If they're too far apart, there needs to be another conversation you have before you present that positioning message and be like, hey, here's what you guys are thinking and hearing. This is what's actually being said. And that
Mhm.
might be like a repositioning framing for your entire business you need to think about and consider. But hopefully, especially if you're in early stage hyper growth, it's like we know who we're targeting, we know what they're expecting, and like how we humanize like our sales VC pitch.
Yeah.
But I think what's really important is one, like presenting it in a way where you're having as an open conversation, like not really presenting that positioning and messaging being like, here's what we're doing, but more of like, here's what I'm thinking based on what I've heard you say and what I've heard these other people say, and here's where we've landed, and
Mhm.
like your thoughts and feedback on it, because like that's what we're trying to build here is like something that we could all get and rally behind.
Yeah.
But also making sure that you like have the proof points to back up what you're trying to say. I've done positioning and messaging exercises a lot throughout my career, and what I try to always do, and you'll hear me say this a lot, and maybe it's because my community management background, but I try to humanize everything. Like I try to not make it like I like to find the combination of qualitative and quantitative data, but I
Mhm.
think that qualitative, especially when it's positioning and messaging and you're trying to humanize like what you're trying to say, it's really important to bring in that qualitative aspect of it. So, uh, bringing in quotes from what you heard from other people, showing what they've done or what they've said or who they are. Sometimes I've gone and just like taken their LinkedIn profile, literally copied and pasted like what's their bio and like what do they do and like what do they think about themselves, and just like really trying to put ourselves in the shoes of the buyer versus just the seller. And I think that can really help convey the message you're trying to do. And then, as I was kind of saying, at the start there, it's not about one way or the other. It's about mirroring the two together. And so, finding what your founders or leaders, etc., are trying to say and what the market's actually saying, and you as a product marketer, how do you blend that into what it needs to be to make everybody happy? Um, and then it really depends on like where those deliverables are going to be happening. Like
Mhm.
if you're building things for your founders, that's going to be more of like an internal pitch to VCs or whatever. Like you have a little more flexibility to go more towards their end. If you're building things that are going to be in a sales deck that you think is going to perform better in those sales led conversations, you can go a little more on the customer side, and then you find like that nice area in the middle for maybe what you're going to be put on the website. Um, and yeah, you just kind of go from there. And the last part I'll kind of say is like just keep testing, like
Mhm.
making sure you can then back up that qualitative stuff with quantitative. Because what I will say too, especially for those in like a hyper growth stage, like early startup, you probably don't have data yet. Like you're just not at that stage where you have enough customers or you have enough proof points in the market. You need to go into it with open mind of saying like we're going to experiment and we're going to see what the impact is and learn from there, because you probably just will not have enough like quantitative data to make like a sound decision based on that information alone.
Yeah. This is really good advice, Jeff. Um, I think, having that open conversation of like sometimes as product marketers, we've done all this research, we have all these conversations with customers. We're like, all right, we got this messaging nailed, and we come in hot to the rest of the team, whether product team or leadership or others who have buy-in into that, and they're like, whoa, whoa,
Yep.
whoa, that's not really the direction that we want to go.
Yep.
And you know, it's almost like you just can't come in like too sure footed and putting your foot down like this is what we're going to do, but getting the
Yeah.
perspective from others from a product side of thing and from the direction of the business as well is is
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, and the way that I'd also think about it is almost like you're buying software is the way I like to think about it. So when you do go in those conversations and like let's say you're gonna be pitching, positioning, and messaging, you don't want to just come in without anybody having background into what you're trying to do. Like obviously the product marketing team understands maybe like what you put together, maybe the marketing team does, but you
Mhm.
also want to get buy-in from other stakeholders so that when you do approach those hurdles of maybe higher leadership or um, certain stakeholders who are trying to get the approval on this, like you've already gone over with maybe the sales leadership or you've gone over with the customer success leadership or the product leadership, and you get them because I think a lot of times, like similar to like software buying, it's sometimes like a decision by committee. And the more stakeholders that you can get aligned with you and saying like, we're into this, it's an easier decision because, I think a lot of times people's first reaction is to say no or say I'm not sure, which can be deflating to
Yeah.
somebody who's put a lot of time into positioning messaging you talked about. And I think what's important is like you need to have like that support and enthusiasm behind you going into those decisions because you likely will run into a no right away. Um, and well, maybe not a no, but a well, like that type of situation.
Yeah.
And that's perfectly normal. That's everyone's reaction to anything that they haven't had enough time to think and process about.
For sure.
Um, and I think that's the other piece of advice I would give. And sorry, these are just coming to me, Josh, as we're just talking through it. But
Go for it.
you want to also set people up so that they can feel like not caught off guard. So when I'm putting together positioning or messaging, I want to take you along for the journey, not just suddenly be like, here it is, react. What do you think? Like I want them to actually understand what we've been thinking about, what we've been testing, talk to them about it. I think a lot of people like really get obsessed with this whole like grand show of like presentations and even outside positioning and messaging, like something that I try to do a lot these days is like someone will reach out and be like, I want to talk to you about this thing. I'm like, can you first record like a loom for me and walk me through it so then when we get into this meeting, we can actually have a conversation that would be productive and impactful versus like I'm trying to digest and understand everything you just said to me. Same thing goes with messaging and positioning, and even sometimes more so because um, they're processing what you're saying emotionally. So
Mhm.
you want to set people up to really understand that, so that when you do have those conversations, they're productive versus let me think about it, and then suddenly they're kind of sulking it and thinking through it on their own without having you there to support them through that conversation.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And, kind of giving that understanding of, hey, this is why we're doing it. And this is just a prep for our conversation on our
Yep.
thoughts on messaging positioning, because it's not like it's just a new marketing tactic that, hey, we're going to kick off next month and test
Yep.
it. It's very foundational. It can change absolutely everything about the business, the way it's sold, the way it goes to market, the way you communicate everything.
Yep.
I heard, and you spoke about kind of having like a committee behind you that is
Mm-hmm.
backing what you're saying. I heard April Dunford say the exact same thing. I'm pretty sure it was on her positioning podcast, but
Hmm.
she was talking about when she is a consultant going into a business, and a lot of times she's working with the CEO, because a lot of positioning comes back to approval from the CEO because
Yeah.
of how foundational it is to the business. She goes and first has conversations and backing, especially from whoever the sales leader is, the VP of sales,
Yep.
because more times than not, who's the CEO going to listen to? The person who's
Yep.
mostly responsible for where the revenue is coming from. That's going to be
Yep.
the leader of the sales team. And if you, as a product marketer, you want to update the positioning or have some ideas there, if you have that backing from someone who's on the sales team, who's
Yeah.
obviously out in the field having those customer conversations all the time too, like that's going to have a ton of weight behind it if you need the senior leadership to make an approval.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. And I think from our side in the product marketing world at Vitally, like we have done a really great job of building our connection with sales, and we happen to run sales enablement as well, so that helps in that regard. But
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, I work very hip and hip with our VP of sales because, as you mentioned, it's very critical, especially when you're talking from a sales-led perspective. Um, that sales team, they're the ones who are they're on the front lines. They're the ones who are hearing feedback. They're the ones who are hearing the things that you're running into. They're the first ones who are going to say, it ain't working. And that's the last thing your CEO or your CRO wants to hear. So, um, they want to find out what's working. And so, what I
Yeah.
found really interesting as well, we talked about testing earlier on, and there's like other ways. There's obviously the traditional ways you can test, like doing A/B testing on your website, but you can also test messaging through your sales team. Um, have them share collateral, have them share a different presentation style, have them say certain words, and then reach out and say, did it resonate? Is it making them move through the funnel faster? And like those are the small little points, proof points that you kind of just need to just get that momentum to say, hey, it worked. Because like let's be honest, you're not going to get into a call where like the CEO is going to be like, let's go through all 50 deals and let's see where it worked and didn't work. It's like, hey, we closed that one six-figure deal because of this. We're like, whoa, perfect. Okay. Like
Mhm.
that's the type of stuff people need to hear. And so, yeah, really building that relationship with your sales team to use them as like testing ground as well can be super impactful. And some sales teams will definitely be a little more pushback on that. We're like, we don't want to change our process, but it just takes one. We're like, hey guys, it worked, and that kind of quickly moves through the echo chamber of your sales team, and they're like, let's all try this.
Mhm.
So yeah, I totally agree with that take from April. I think it's spot on.
Yeah. Nice. I love it. I want to switch gears here a little bit and kind of dive into your background of brand as well. So, I wanted to get your opinion. Well, I feel like you kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier that, well, depending on the size of company that you are working for, your brand and product messaging should be the same. But can
Yep.
you dive into that thought a little bit more?
Yeah. So I had the same conversation on the We're Not Marketers podcast, and I think it's important to kind of convey from my perspective. But so currently, my title is Director of Brand and Product Marketing, um, and I think it fits the role that I'm currently in. But if I were to say, like, if I was at Nike or a big company, I don't think my role in brand marketing would work there, because I think that brand takes on a different kind of like shape and form the bigger the company is and the more your brand is influential. But when I joined Vitally, I was like the 16th hire. So I was like the third marketing hire. And one of the things that was really appealing to me was it was an opportunity to shape what I think could be impactful product marketing. And one of the struggles I had really early on in my career in product marketing was product and brand marketing were separate, which meant I was consistently fighting these battles to get the brand team to resonate what the product and positioning was. And so what was interesting to me was with this opportunity was how can I make our product and positioning more apparent through our brand by making our product essentially the brand. And one of the other key differentiators of why I wanted to take that approach was um, coming in, I spent a lot of time investigating our competitors, and I noticed that them, as well as the company I was joining, Vitally, we were all kind of hiding behind just messaging without showing what our product was. And one of the things I've quickly have learned moving into the B2B SaaS space is that people look at software all day, but they quickly make decisions based on what that software can do. And the longer that you withhold them from seeing and understanding what that software is, the more you're putting yourself behind. So I saw it as a competitive advantage to make our brand actually more about the product. And so that was kind of the approach that I took when I was building everything out. And maybe in 10, 15 years, if like, Vitally evolves into a Salesforce size company, like maybe that doesn't work anymore. Maybe the brand is more around what's our ethos, what's our culture, what does the new T-shirt look like? But today, for me, especially in this like earlier stage B2B SaaS, like I think brand and product positioning are one and the same, and I think that's what's allowed us to really stay separated in the market and really stand out in what is arguably a crowded market, but also has some really big leaders and people like Gainsight and Churn Zero who have been around for quite some time. And you gotta do things a little bit differently if you want to quickly move up and get noticed.
Yeah. Jeff, I'm on board with this take. I think that's a great one, and you can definitely see the difference in the size of the company. You know, like you said,
Yeah.
Salesforce, Nike. What's another one? Trying to think here. I don't know, HubSpot, something like that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's going to be much different at that size of business because they have many different service lines too. They have a lot of different products, and if you're
Yep.
put the, you know, you can't brand your business to one product then because there's just a whole suite of them.
Yep. Exactly.
So it sounds like you gave a little bit of a hint related to interactive demos
Yep.
in essentially showing your product. That was kind of one of the questions I wanted to ask you of, you know, what are the steps to creating an interactive demo that actually shows the value of the product to the buyer?
I think the most important thing when you're really building out like an interactive demo is you want to get to those aha moments as quickly as possible. People really don't want to like slog through like what your product like why and like what it is. Like you should assume they've kind of already gotten to that place. What you really want people to experience when they're going through an interactive product demo is like what makes your product different, what makes it impactful, what makes it cool. And so getting people there as fast as you can is going to be super important. But what's also important is you don't want them to feel completely lost. And so
Yeah.
um, what I like to kind of do when I make interactive product demos is kind of do it in the way that I would demo it. So like going through each screen and clicking it and going through it as like how you'd actually demo it and talking to somebody. I think that's really important when you're going through it because a lot of times people are just dropping into these experiences and you want to get to that aha moment as quickly as possible, but you also don't want them to feel kind of like completely lost. So yeah, it's tough though. I mean, it really kind of depends on where and when you're doing it for your audience.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's definitely it's always interesting when you're building out product demos. And we have a few different ways that we do it that I think tell really great stories in different ways, and we do it definitely based on who that audience is going to be and where they are in their customer journey.
Can you dive into that a little bit? What are some of your processes on the different interactive demos you've created at Vitally?
Yeah, so the way I kind of think about it is we have basically like three different experiences. So the first one is our primary one, which is our overall product tour. So that one's going to be like the most in depth. So that one is like if you have no idea what Vitally is at all, we want to take you through it and like easily educate you through it. And so what's really important in that is like really quick, succinct steps of like what this is, what this is, what this is. We are a sales led product, so you're not going to be able to just go through that and like make a buying decision. But what I want to do is if that's going to be your first introduction to our product, I want you to be able to move into that conversation with our sales team and have a background and understand the language that they're speaking. So that's kind of the first like foray into it. The second one that we went out and built was how to use the features so we can drive more self-service to adopting the different features of the platform. And so with those ones, they're a little more detailed oriented, but they're designed for our existing customers to be able to understand, like, now that they're in Vitally, how do you use it? And so they're a little more detailed. They're a little more hard to understand if you were to just like never used the platform before. But that one's super important. And then what we ended up coming back around to is a dual use case, which is for existing customers and prospects, which is what we call our blueprints. And so we got to this really interesting point with Vitally, which was like we had all these customers that were using Vitally in these really great ways, and we wanted to showcase how they are doing that. And we started using the Vatic, and we quickly realized like, could we turn their ways of using the product into interactive product demos that we can then share with both prospects and customers for them to understand how Vitally can be used or how I can use Vitally today. And so with those ones, we started to build out really quick kind of like templates that showcase the power of Vitally, which can be super impactful for prospects who's like, hey, I'm interested in using your product, but can it do these things? Like, hey, here's an example of how I can do it. Or
Yeah.
you have somebody who's like, hey, like we're using the product and we're ready to build like some sort of template. Do you have any ideas of like how we could do that? And we can share that with them and they can kind of go through those steps and see how we've done it. And so those are kind of the three ways that we've approached it. And what you kind of find there is like the first one with the primary interactive demo. It's really important that like you understand that that's going to be someone who's never really experienced your product before. You want to set them up with the language and understanding like what they're looking at so they feel successful when they do have those sales conversations. The second one is how do I teach people to use the product now that they're in it without me having to use too much human power to train them on the product itself. And then the last one kind of brings them both together, which is like, how can I educate people on what the product does, but also show the power of it and going a little more in depth. So those are kind of the three primary use cases that we have with interactive product tours, but we're always looking for new ways that we can use them further.
That was a masterclass. So seriously, if you're listening and you're getting started with interactive demo, oh my gosh, go back and replay that. That was awesome. I definitely took some notes on that. I'm going to go back and listen. We have a similar, where I work, we have a similar process for the interactive demos broken down by specific personas and the types of users that would use the product, having it more, here's the general one, but if you want to get deeper into specific features, we're in the process of breaking those interactive demos into different parts and having the specific feature, interactive demo feature on those specific website pages on the website as well. So if they're learning about, they're diving into a specific feature of the product, all right, they can do an interactive demo of that specific feature of the product as well. That's awesome. All right. Yeah.
And I think just to kind of tie it back to what I was saying, be human with it. Like you have to remember, like these are people that are going into these situations probably with not a ton of like background. So, make it easy for them, make it engaging, make it fun, and make it something that they want to keep clicking through. And don't try to throw the entire kitchen sink at it because while you think you're probably being more effective by putting a lot of information, you're probably actually being detrimental to yourself and the person who's looking at it. So it's better to start simple and human and then let those tougher, more complicated conversations take place when necessary.
That was one of the things we talked, Zach and I talked through of, it was like, how do you be concise in your messaging? And it was like, when you want to say absolutely everything, and he was kind of like, get over yourself. You're never going to be able to say everything that you want to. Otherwise, you're just providing your prospect or a potential customer with a book that they'll never read. You need to break it into chapters, and the chapters are different levels of the sales cycle. They're going to be different stages. So, I love this. We talked a little bit about website messaging. So, say there's product marketers listening and they need to create website messaging and copy for a new product feature. What's your advice on the approach that they should take?
Yeah. So I think the first thing that you really want to do is talk to your product team. Understand, this kind of goes back to like the earlier talking we were having about like positioning and messaging, talking to your founders and why they built the product. Well, you want to talk to your product marketers and your product managers on why they built the feature. Hopefully at that point they've done some research, they have some background into what we've heard from our existing customers, what we've heard from prospects, what we've seen in the market, and that'll help you first get your foundational like understanding of like why did we build this? What's our main story for why somebody would want to use this product or feature that we're building. So I think that's the very most important piece of it. The second piece, which I think a lot of people tend to miss out on that they need to really start to do more of, is go look at what your competitors are doing and seeing how they're talking about this. Because like maybe you are first to market with a certain feature, but maybe you're not, or maybe they're doing something that's similar and you're doing it in response to something that they've done or are missing. And what's important about that is you want to make sure that you're not saying the exact same thing that your competitor is saying in the market. You might have the same feature. You might be building it in response to something that they already have. But how can you make sure that yours stands out? And I think one of the things that's most important with that is like you want to make sure that, your you're not saying the same thing, and then your prospects like, well, what's the difference between these two? A fun example of this actually, that was interesting. This is more on the B2C side, but when I was at Eero, we were doing packaging for Costco, and we were going to be like having like our so Costco's got like very specific SKUs, and like so we were going up against Google, and they had a four package four Wi-Fi routers in a box, and ours was gonna be four Wi-Fi routers in a box, and we were like, how are we gonna make ours look different? And my suggestion was make our house look bigger. Like no one's gonna really know the difference. Like they're not gonna know. Like they're not looking at the actual square footage, but if you look at the back of the two boxes, they both have four. But oh, this house looks bigger. How do you think about those different little tiny advantages of like how can you stand out and say ours is better or different? It's super important. Sometimes it's as little as make the house bigger, or sometimes it's like they're completely missing this whole message of like the pain point that a customer are actually feeling, and we know that we can dive in and take advantage of that opportunity and say it. And then the second part is what I actually like to do a lot is talk to either my customer success or support team and understand what they're hearing from the market. But you're probably recognizing from me a lot, and what I'm saying is like pain points. And while I think a lot of times people see pain points as a negative, most people aren't looking for solutions to things that they're already satisfied or good about. Like, one of the things I've learned early on in like product marketing and messaging building is people like want to emotionally feel like you're solving something for them. And so, you'll have a lot of times you'll see like some typical positioning messaging being like the problem, the solution. And I think that a lot of times we try to be like too fancy or sexy with that and like try to move away from it. But that's what works for people. They want to say, yes, I have that problem. Here's how it's solving for me. And so taking the time to really talk to your support and customer success teams or any other customer facing team and like understanding like what has been the feedback, like what would the impact be of this thing that we're building for the people that you interact with, is super important because you really want your message to be value based. Um, and yeah, from there, you should try and test that messaging. It doesn't mean like going live and like publishing it, but if you have some like trusted customer advisors or anybody that like share with them. Say like, how do you think about this? How do you feel about this? And get their feedback on it so you can at least dial in a little bit and feel good about it. And then the last part is like, just go for it. I think that people get a little too caught up in trying to be too perfect, and it holds them back from like feeling confident in launching it. But we all kind of get caught up in our vacuums.
Yeah.
And what's important is like just getting things out there, testing, iterating. Like one of the things I have to be reminded a lot about, especially when it comes to work, is like we're not saving lives. Maybe some of you who are in like B2B SaaS or medical, like, okay, maybe you are saving lives, but most of us are not saving lives. And so it's okay if it's not perfect. Like you're not going to do anything like detrimentally like bad. So just see what happens. And as we talked about at the top of the call, continue to iterate. Like it, once you put it out there, unless you're printing on a box, it's not end all be all. Like you can go into the HTML and change your website. It's okay. And I think, that's what's most important. And then, the last part, I think this gets kind of, missed a lot in product marketing. And I won't lie, it's something that we have struggled with from time to time. And it's probably why I haven't mentioned it once, but it's setting goals around it. Like, what are you hoping to see the outcomes be so that if you don't achieve it, like, to start pulling some levers and changing things. And maybe that's CTA clicks, maybe that's click-throughs on a product tour, whatever it may be, like set some sort of North Star so that you're not just sending something out there and then not knowing whether or not it has worked to some level. And I think that's super important so that you kind of know where to go from there.
So good. All right, so I took notes on that. I got like, well, once you added what's the goal, I got 7 things. All right, so I'm gonna list them out in order. All right, one is, first you're talking to your product team.
Yep.
Why did they create it? What is it? What does it do? Next, you're speaking to, or you're going to look at competitor website messaging. Are we Is the new feature getting up to speed on what our competitors doing? Do they have something already out there that we can at least get a basis on? Are they missing something in their messaging that we could really lean on? Third, you're speaking to your customer success and your support teams. What are they hearing from current customers? I put in, after speaking with them, you're setting your goal on what you're messaging. Like what do you want the goal to be?
Yep.
Four, and then five is your testing. Six, just ship it, dude. Just get it out there. Go for it. And seven is iterating.
Yep.
I love it.
And sometimes setting that goal is up there with number one. Like, what is your product team trying to achieve with this? Like, not everything is on a landing page. Like, sometimes you're launching new features and you're just trying to drive adoption through your product or something like that. And sometimes you need to have that goal set from the get go. So, how am I going to get this in front of people and achieve what we're trying to achieve from a product perspective?
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I think that's the right seven, with goals shifting from one to four or back to four.
Wherever.
Sometimes you need to set a new one at 8. Who knows?
True. Well, that kind of gets us onto this last, core to our conversation was, I wanted to ask, how do you know when messaging is that you create at Vitally is resonating with the audience? And that could come back to the goal that you're setting. You never know. But I wanted to see if you could dive into how you do that. How do you determine what resonates?
So, the easiest answer, sales isn't complaining. If your sales team isn't complaining that people aren't understanding your message, then it's probably working. This kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, where I was talking about qualitative versus quantitative. And why it was so hard for me to even get to goal setting for product marketing is your positioning and messaging that you put out there doesn't just live in one spot. Your positioning messaging, maybe it starts on the homepage. Then it goes into a sales deck. Then it goes into an email that your customer support team is using. Then it goes into some campaign that your demand gen team is putting out there on a podcast as an ad. It can virtually be very hard to measure the effectiveness of your positioning and messaging you put out there. So yes, if you can set goals, that's great. If you are in a B2B space for SaaS and you're doing product-led growth, you should be looking at, are you driving conversions to your website? If you're in a sales-led position, it's a little tougher because the sales cycles are longer. There's a lot more things that happen on calls that are not just buttons being clicked that can be tracked. And so you need to kind of have what your North Star indicators are. And I jokingly said at the start here, is your sales team complaining? But it is true. But the other part that you can look at is if you are a product marketing team and your positioning messaging is supposed to be driving sales or growth, look at those numbers that indicate sales or growth. Are people adopting the feature? Okay, my positioning messaging has been successful because my goal of getting this awareness out there was for people to use it. Are they using it? Simple yes or no. Are people buying the product? Yes or no. Are we continuing to have competitive win rates that increase? Yes or no. And if you can look at these things, you can at least look at them together and be product marketing is being successful. I think one of the best indications that a product marketing team has been successful is that they're not being asked to do the same work twice. If you're being asked to do the same work again, that means you probably didn't do it right the first time. And they don't know what the answer is, but they're looking for an answer. And so if you're in that position, then you're probably, or if you're in the position not being asked to do it twice, then it's probably working. Because as we also talked about with customers, people who are in a good position, they don't usually complain or look for pain points. So if your sales team isn't complaining or having pain points outside of hey, I need this sales asset, or do we have any information on this competitor? But from your actual core messaging or how they are set up to position and talk about the product or anything of that, you're probably in a pretty good position as a product marketing team. But it's going to vary business to business. I think Julian Savage, I think that's how you pronounce his last name, he asked an interesting question the other day, which is what should be the key OKR for product marketing teams? And there was a lot of different answers. My answer was actually interesting. I put in NRR, um, which I don't think I would have had the perspective of before joining Vitally, because Vitally is a customer success platform, and so I've gotten more experience with customer success teams and their goals.
Yeah.
But a product marketing team should be probably effectively doing two main things: bringing in an audience, so helping your sales team be able to position and sell it to them, or helping your product led growth actually function by making things appealing to people who are coming into your business and looking at your product. And then how do you make sure that people are seeing value and continue to adopt the things that your product team or your company are building and putting out there? And those two things are both new revenue and retention. And so NRR is a very interesting number or goal to be looking at from a product marketing perspective, because you're no longer just looking at, am I impacting sales growth or am I impacting customer growth? Am I impacting business growth from a whole perspective? So to me, like, yeah, I mean, that's kind of like a long-winded answer where we got the NRR, but
Yeah.
basically two things: is your sales team or whoever you're supporting happy, and are you driving growth for your business? Because ultimately, that's what we're all here to do, is to
Hmm.
make businesses successful.
Hey, that sounds like some of the takes that I've heard, and a little bit related to your podcast of of product marketing being more than just a marketing function. It could be a business, more of a business as a whole function,
Yeah,
strategy. Yep.
yeah. Go to market strategy. It's a good mixture of a lot of those things. And for better or worse, I don't think it's that product marketers aren't doing these things. They don't need the title to enable those conversations and to be able to drive these strategies and do the work. It's more just, anytime I think you're having a conversation about what is product marketing, it's always a struggle.
Yeah.
And maybe if it was, what's go to market? Oh, that's easy. I understand what go to market is, but what's product marketing? Um, yeah. So we'll see. We'll see where the conversations go.
I tried. I had dinner with my dad last week, and I tried to explain what product marketing is. He was a blue collar man. Worked outside a lot of his life, and so it even trying to describe like marketing and like this is what I do on my day to day. It's just foreign. So even it's confusing when you're also trying to explain it to people who are in a business function or even in a marketing function, like what does product marketing do, and
Yep.
they're like, okay. That's when it can have a very confusing definition and range. We've
Yep.
talked about that a lot. It could range from business to business, from also the go to market. Are you product led or are you a sales led organization? Product marketing is
Yep.
different in both.
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome.
100%.
Hey, I want to close this out here with a couple questions. If you were to give one piece of messaging advice to a listener that they can go and implement tomorrow, what would it be?
Mm, that's a tough question. I think the the best advice I can give people, outside of like all the stuff we kind of talked about today, which was like how to do it, is the mental state of doing it. Like, I want you to remove yourself from your role and put yourself into the shoes of your customer. If you were on the other side of this, don't think so much about like, how do I do this or what should I do? Like, what would you want to hear? Like, what do you want to hear? And try to put that into practice. Now, it's on you as a product marketer to apply the business product marketing lens to it that you're capable of doing, but try to not talk with the jargon. Try to not be so technical. Make it in a way that's human, as we've talked about, and relatable. And that's what a lot of people just kind of want to hear. Um, the last kind of thing I'll put on that is like, one of the most interesting conversations I had in an interview like a long time ago was, we talked about how, like, what's it there like, what's the difference between B2B messaging and B2C messaging? And I was like, nothing. B2B is just talking to consumers of a business. Like, that's all it really is. And if you get too dialed in, like this is for business, well, you got to remember at the end of the day, like you're talking to people and they have lives and they have needs and they have goals and they're consumers just as much as a B2C customer is.
100%. 100%. Hey, it feels like we're on this, humanity theme. And one of the more personal questions I always ask at the end of the episode, and it's just related to life. If you could put into a single sentence what living is all about, what would you say?
Ooh. Oof. It's a tough question. I think it's all about walking away from each day feeling like you did the best you could, whether it's for yourself, for everybody around you. Um, I try to go about life being pretty selfless. And so I think if you feel like you've done that, and maybe that comes through with the stuff that's about my messaging too, where it's about other people and thinking about the actual people on the other side of it. Like, yeah, I mean, life, it's about doing what's best for everyone so we all get to the same place, which is, feeling happy, feeling good, and feeling like we're all in this together. So,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, man.
It's
No,
a
I
tough
love
question,
it.
but,
I know it's a tough question. It's thought provoking. A lot of times,
yeah, I like it.
we're so busy we don't think to like, hey, what am I doing here? What am I doing this today? And we got some really awesome answers from everyone that's been on the show. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely.
If listeners found what you had to share insightful, what is something they can do to help lift you up?
Just if there's anything you need, like I love to help people. So if there's stuff that you want to dive deeper into from this, or if there's questions you have, like don't hesitate to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Like
Mm-hmm.
I love to help people, and to this point in time, I'm not making it a financial gain. So I like to talk to people. I'm not being a consultant, so like
Yeah.
it gives me pleasure in like helping people solve problems. I've helped random people update their resume. I've helped random people answer questions about how they should get through their positioning messaging struggles. So yeah, what lifts me up is like either knowing what I've shared has helped you, or if there is ways that I can be a further help. Would love that. And yeah, once the podcast is up and running, check it out and hope
Yeah.
you enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everyone, you heard him. His podcast coming out soon. Can you share the name with us again?
Yeah, so it's called Deaf to Product Marketing.
All right.
And we'll decide if it's going to be finally put to rest or what happens. We'll see.
Awesome.
It's a mystery.
Awesome. I love it. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it so much. This is awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. It was a great time talking to you.
Alrighty. Bye, everyone.